Wanted in the harsh and untamed Wild West, there is an outlaw. Slinging guns and slinging bottles, the man is not without style nor taste. He is wanted dead or alive, living his life on the constant run. No posse can hope to match the bandit gang, and no banks can hope to secure their riches. He is wanted by the law and wanted by the ladies, and his name is Wood Barrel Bourbon. Yeah, man! Welcome to the Frickcast and to the Dr. Squatch Soap Guides. Today we have the Wood Barrel Bourbon, a brick that turns your shower into a Wild West saloon. This has been a fan favorite for many Squatchers ever since its release, and that's for good reason. The Wood Barrel Bourbon flavor boasts one of the best scents on the menu, and the brick has what many feel to be an ideal amount of grit. So let's have the bartender pour us another round and get into this cowboy brick. The Bourbon Boy has some of the more unique ingredients amongst OGs. We have two highlighted ingredients, Jimmy Red Corn and sand. Now both of these are what give the bar its medium grit, as well as its deeply exfoliating abilities. Let's start with sand, as that's the most straightforward. Sand is basically just an exfoliant that helps to remove dead skin or impurities. Sand is present in a few Squatch bars and always gives the bar a consistent grit. Jimmy Red Cornmeal is probably the standout here. So what even is Jimmy Red Corn? Well, it's basically a red colored corn that differs a bit from your traditional yellow boy. It has a sweet taste, and the Jimmy variety is apparently the best version of it out there. In the case of our bourbon brick, the cornmeal essentially acts as another exfoliant, and it also contains antioxidants that leave skin smoother and cleansed. It has no actual bourbon, but it does have brewer's yeast. Now, if you know a bit about distilling versus fermenting alcohols, this may sound a bit odd. Brewing almost exclusively means making beer, and the yeast here is mainly used for fermenting alcohols such as beer, wine, or mead. You basically just let it sit, let the yeast do its thing, and turn it into alcohol. Distilling is a much more complicated process, but that's how you get liquors such as vodka, gin, or whiskey. They get fermented first as well, where the alcohol is created, and then distilled, where the alcohol is separated. It usually has its own type of yeast, but in the case of whiskey or bourbon, you may see some brewer's yeast being used, especially during its fermentation period, so it actually isn't all that out of place here in this bourbon brick. Now, brewer's yeast has a number of benefits when consumed, but what does it provide when used in skincare? Turns out yeast is rich in nutrients and has deeply restorative and hydrating properties. It leads to healthier, more flexible skin that helps reduce the aging process. Our last ingredient is annatto powder, which is full of antioxidants and vitamin E. It helps soothe irritated skin as well as cleanses impurities. It is useful against blemishes and signs of aging. With all these beneficial ingredients, we're looking at a bar that seems to prioritize young, healthy-looking skin, and one that doesn't seem to just be a snake oil salesman. Perhaps the biggest strength of this brick is its scent. It's about medium strength, on par with most, but the smell is much more complicated. It is actually hard to place. It is reminiscent of bourbon aging in an oak barrel, but is also much sweeter, and really gives off the vibe of fall or autumn. It walks a middle ground between manliness and pleasantness, and despite being full of bourbon, it walks that line pretty straight. The medium grit of this bar gives it a more intense exfoliation and a deeper clean. Medium grit is accurate, although it may be on the heavier side of that. Not quite the level of a bar like the pine tar, but still much more than the eucalyptus or goat's milk. It's not the most moisturizing or hydrating bar of the lineup, although if we're being honest, every Squatch brick has those qualities. The bourbon brick maybe just not as much, but it still makes for a fantastic scrub, one that'll have you stepping out of the shower, feeling like a Peaky Blinder. Now, as for my thoughts, I really like this bar. It's one of the more well-rounded bricks out there and excels in just about every area. Some may find the grit level to be too much for their liking, but I do think most will appreciate this bar, and I know just about everyone is going to love its sweet bourbon scent. I think I have to rank it as something else entirely. This is one of the hardest ones to rank for me, as I feel it could easily be some sort of god. However, I already have a few spots reserved in the pantheon for others that I feel just edge it out, and it kind of forces me to drop it a tier, but it's almost in between. Think of it like some sort of demigod, like Hercules, not quite Zeus, but Hercules is still Hercules. Still, I would say the Wood Barrel Bourbon is one of the better, more serious grit bars out there. It's a lot like a more relaxed version of the Pine Tar, toned down just a notch and with a more sweet, bourbon-esque scent. There's a reason this is a favorite for many. It also reminds me a lot of the Birchwood Breeze, which if I recall correctly released just after the Bourbon Boy. Both are some of my favorite OGs. The Wood Barrel Bourbon is one of the best overall Squatch flavors out there, and if you're someone who likes some grit in your bricc, check this gunslinging one out. That's only my opinion though, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments. What do you think of the Bourbon Boy? Do you like it, or do you find it overrated? Locked in a standoff, the outlaw knows he is fastest on the draw. No matter the gunman across from him, and no matter how many lawmen the sheriff brings, he is much too quick. The dead eye locks on, and soon he's sitting at the bar once more.